Good morning and welcome to the Ignition News. It is Sunday, January 11th, 2026. As fascism rages across America, I want to show you the impact of the lack of caring for ourselves and our community is having before we get into some of the most dramatic stories from around the country. We're going to go today to San Francisco, where Ken Jones, a firefighter who for 17 years fought fires in San Francisco, is now battling with cancer. And Blue Shield of California has denied his treatment. He's now asking the city of San Francisco to step in and to step up. This is the consequence, my friends, of what happens when our country is focused on endless imperialism, empire, and wars. When we are focused more on the whims of an imperial president and his sycophants who simply can't say no to him, everyday men and women like Ken Jones find themselves facing literal death. We have yet to solve the answers and problems that most Americans go through every single day, whether that is paying your bills or finding affordable living, finding a good job. And then at the end of it all, if you're someone like Ken Jones, a retired firefighter who gave 17 years of his life to his community, now having to struggle and fight for his life in a for-profit insurance scam. This, my friends, is why we talk about these kinds of things on the Ignition News. The news today is everywhere. It is tightly controlled, tightly wound. And I'm sure you wouldn't be surprised that many of the same interests that own and decide critical information about your healthcare also fund and control information like the media. It's not a wild conspiracy theory, unfortunately. Let me break that down just a little bit more. In America, I'm sure you've probably heard of one of the top big three institutional investors, whether that's BlackRock, Vanguard, or State Street. These three firms are the top owners of almost every major media company in both sectors simultaneously. So in other words, they have and are the largest shareholder in companies like Disney, Comcast, Warner Brothers, Discovery, and Fox, and also in health companies like United Health Group, CVS, Cigna, and Humanity. And of course, this means that they don't necessarily directly run the daily news, but they do hold voting rights and financial influence over the boards and the people who decide who has the right jobs, who hires the right reporters, and the people paying for your healthcare. This is why we do the Ignition News. So let us move on from that tragedy in America and understand what else is happening on this January 10th. We're actually going to go to, because what is happening in Iran right now is a dire warning of what it means to protest here in the United States of America. Iran just went dark. And when authoritarian regimes cut the lights, people die. On January 8th, the Iranian government imposed a nationwide internet blackout. 99% of the country lost connectivity. That means no social media or phone service, just silence. So here's what we know. Protests erupted on December 28th over the economic collapse. The Iranian rial lost half of its value since September. Inflation has hit 50%. People in Tehran's Grand Bazaar walked out, and then it spread to 120 cities across 31 provinces. Millions of people are in the streets right now. What has been the response of the Iranian regime? Live ammunition, firing into the streets. We know at least 51 people are dead. 9 of them are children under 18. Since the internet has gone down, of course, getting this information becomes less and less reliable. And with further reports of emergency rooms being overwhelmed with gunshot victims, an orthopedic surgeon told CNN 30 bodies were in one single ER alone, all of them shot in the limbs. And Farabi Eye Hospital saw between 200 and 300 patients with pellets lodged into their eyes. 200 to 300 people shot in the eyes. Let's think about that for a second. We know the death toll is much higher than 51. Some reports have said as many as 217. The regime is not even hiding its intentions, by the way. Khamenei called protesters vandals and rioters. Does that language sound familiar to you at all? Some Iranians are using Starlink satellite to bypass the blackout, but the government is actively jamming these GPS signals. This is why this matters. Friends, this is our future. This is what unchecked power looks like. When governments can flip a switch and cut you off from the world, they can do anything to you. The Iranian people are standing up for a revolution, but they need the world to see it. And what is our government doing? Well, Trump posted on Truth Social threatening to hit hard if Iranians kill protesters. After what happened in Venezuela, maybe that's not an empty threat. But threats without follow-up are just noise. And of course, it is impossible to ignore the irony of the United States president threatening Iran to engage with its protesters peacefully, while masked men and women terrorize our streets, literally shooting women, recording them. Let's get on to the same topic, training. We did a little bit of digging into a slight statistic that someone had mentioned regarding Jonathan Ross, the ICE agent who killed Renee Good. You may have picked up on this. They were talking about ICE agents receiving 47 days of training. This is actually down substantially in order to do really one thing. They changed the number of days of training to 47. Now, in case that isn't incredibly obvious to anyone, they did this to please the President of the United States of America. This agency, DHS and ICE, cut ICE training from 5 months to 47 days in order to do a couple of things. First and foremost, as a sycophantic and disgusting nod to the President of the United States. And second, to get ICE agents out on the street as fast as possible. What that means is federal law enforcement officers who carry guns, make arrests, and have the power to detain people are getting trained for 47 days as a purely symbolic gesture to Donald Trump. And now we're seeing with our own eyes and hearing with our own ears the consequence of that. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem defended the shooting of Renee Good, claiming the ICE officer followed his training. If that's true, then obviously the training is the problem. Here's what they eliminated: 5 weeks of Spanish language training, gone. The curriculum that used to span 150 days is now crammed into 47 days. They've said that they have streamlined the training to cut redundancy. They said no subject matter has been cut and that candidates still learn the same elements. Meanwhile, ICE has doubled its workforce in 1 year. The agent blew past its original hiring target with a 120% increase in officers and agents. DHS announced this as an accomplishment. They targeted their recruitment at Fox News viewers, UFC fans, and gun proponents. They got $30 billion from Congress to hire a new staff. Well, this is the consequence of that. The day before ICE killed Renee Nicole Good in Minneapolis, the DHS Twitter account posted, "Good morning, Minneapolis," like it was a joke, like terrifying a city is entertainment. The Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension announced the FBI is denying them access to evidence and refusing to work with them jointly on the investigation of the shooting of Renee Good. Federal agents investigated by federal agents. I wonder what could go wrong. Well, the ICE system is working just as they designed. Shortened training, political hiring, and zero accountability. And when it goes wrong, they are actively looking to cover it up. And speaking of covering up, let's go to our next story. Our podcast, The Ignition News, is brought to you by Ignite, fighting fascism in the age of its rise. Ignite is a signature podcast with the field guide to fighting fascism in the United States of America. With 12 episodes and 4 bonus episodes, we teach you all of the critical information you need to fight fascism in America by starting at your front door. Download Ignite today. Season 2 comes out January 12th. Episode 1, How to Steal an Election. Back into the news. The Smithsonian Institution just scrubbed Donald Trump's impeachment from history, quite literally. On Friday, the National Portrait Gallery updated Trump's portrait in the American President's exhibit. They swapped out the photo, okay, that's fine, but they also removed the entire caption that mentioned his 2 impeachments and the January 6th insurrection. The old caption read, "Impeached twice on charges of abuse of power and incitement of insurrection after supporters attacked the U.S. Capitol on January 2021. He was acquitted by the Senate in both trials." The new caption, just his years in office. That's it. The outline of the old sign is actually still visible on the wall beneath the new one because they made it so small. This matters because Trump's portrait now stands alone. Every other president's portrait, from Biden to Obama to Bush to Clinton, has detailed text highlighting events during their presidencies. But Trump's just erased. A National Portrait Gallery spokesperson told Washington Post that they're exploring less descriptive tombstone labels. Funny. It's interesting. That only applies to Trump. In June, Trump fired the National Portrait Gallery's director, Kim Sajid, calling her highly partisan and a strong supporter of DEI. The Smithsonian Board of Regents affirmed that only its secretary could decide personnel matters. Jet resigned anyway. She has not been permanently replaced. Here's what's happening. The Trump administration is systemically and in great effort removing factual information about Trump's presidency from federally funded cultural institutions. They're not saying that the facts are wrong. Trump was impeached twice. That is a historical fact. It is recorded in the congressional records, at least for now. The January 6th attack happened. We watched it happen live. So they are not disputing the facts. They are just erasing the facts. And that is how authoritarians operate. There are not many steps, my friends, between removing plaques of history, of fact, and shooting protesters in the eyeballs. You control the narrative by controlling the institutions. You erase the parts of history that make you look bad. You replace all of the nuance with propaganda, and then you punish anyone who resists. And lest you believe that all of this fascist terrorism doesn't have consequences, I want to wrap it up today with story number 4. What happened to Randall Gamboa? Randall Gamboa went into ICE custody healthy. He came home in a vegetative state. He died just 5 weeks later. This is a riveting story from The Guardian, and it publishes new details, and every single fact about this case causes me more alarm. Gamboa was a 52-year-old man from Costa Rica. He left home in December 2024 to find work in the United States. ICE arrested him in Texas in February for illegal re-entry. He had previously lived in the U.S. undocumented between 2002 and 2013. They held him at Webb County Detention Center and transferred him to Port Isabel. For months, Gamboa video called his family daily. His sister said he looked healthy, sounded strong, and showed no signs of illness. Then, on June 12th, phone calls stopped. They tried to reach him. An ICE agent said he's unable to speak right now, or he'll contact you if he wants to. No information or explanation, just silence. Mata contacted the Costa Rican consulate. They reached out to the ICE facility. The response they got was chilling. He has a health issue. That's why he wasn't answering. So the family hired attorneys. The first 2 were just a scam, by the way. And we finally found out the devastating news. Gamboa was alive, but just barely. He couldn't walk. He couldn't move. He couldn't speak. He could only blink his eyes. Medical records obtained by The Guardian show a transfer request on June 23rd due to altered mental status. Doctors diagnosed him with multiple serious conditions: sepsis, rhabdomyolysis, a condition where the muscle tissue breaks down, and several other severe signs of malnutrition, dehydration, open ulcers, unexplained scarring, and cirrhosis. The family insists Gamboa had no history of mental illness and none of these health issues. DHX spokesperson Tricia McLaughlin claims medical personnel diagnosed Gamboa with unspecified psychosis and that he received appropriate care. She said that the care he received was better than many immigrants have received in their entire lives. What an absolutely terrible thing to say, by the way. On September 3rd, ICE flew Gamboa back to Costa Rica on an air ambulance. He arrived in Costa Rica, and doctors described his condition as vegetative, with brain damage and multiple complications. He never regained consciousness. He died on October 26, 2025. This is a clear example of the horrible human rights issues that are happening with ICE, its detention facilities, and from this administration's attempts to erase history. Whether it is a plaque on the Smithsonian or the entire life of a human being who was simply trying to find work for his family, all of these things are clear. So let us close out our stories and news for January 11th today, because there is one pattern. First, you have Iran cutting the internet access and massacring protesters because it can. We have ICE agents training for 47 days, giving them guns and sending them into the streets because it can. Trump orders the Smithsonian to erase his impeachment because he can. ICE takes a man healthy into custody, destroys that health, and sends him home to die. Unchecked power. This is the through line between all of these stories. Zero accountability. And unfortunately, a media landscape that treats each of these as isolated instances, instead of the systemic destruction of the democratic norms they actually represent. Here's what you need to understand. These things do not happen in a vacuum. They happen because we let them, because we're distracted or exhausted or too willing to believe that someone else is going to come fix it. No one is coming to save you. We are the people who have to demand accountability. We are the ones who have to say no. So here's your assignment. Pick one of these stories, preferably one you didn't know about, and talk about it. People want to look down. They want to forget. I picked stories today that you may not have heard in the onslaught of all of the news and pressure coming from around the world right now, with one specific purpose: to make sure that they were not erased. The Iranian protesters need global attention. Renee Nicole Good's family deserves justice. The Smithsonian needs to be a place of historical fact. And Randall Gamboa's family needs answers. All of this requires us to do is to just give a damn and to act like it matters, because it does. And this has been the January 11th edition of the Ignition News. Stay informed, stay angry, stay organized. If you like the news, be sure to like, subscribe, and follow us along on your favorite podcast platform. Thanks for following the Ignition News. Welcome to the Ignition News, your unfiltered, uncensored source for the actual truth in what is happening in the United States of America and around the world. We are not bought by the billionaires. We are here to be your source of truth in a time where truth matters more than it ever has. Be sure to follow along with your favorite platform on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or Substack. Let's get busy with the truth. Welcome to The Ignition News. Let's ignite.